one of the things that we always look at, and from Elaine Levin with her concept of the 20th century of being about the divergence between the vessel makers and the expressive vessel or conceptual makers. What do you think are the trends that are forming for the 21st century?
Interesting question because I've been noticing a lot of newcomers coming into the field, and there are two different kinds of changes, and both of them have to do with diversity. I think that the field is opening up to a wider base of diversity artists, Mexicans, Americans, Black Americans, Asian Americans. Their voice is coming into focus now, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. A good example of that would be Roberto Longo coming into the field, and his voice and his way of thinking about the vessel and the kind of subject matter that he deals on the vessel. It's not unlike what Aaron Toole is using on his vessel, but that kind of diversity is quite wonderful. There are a number of Black artists that are coming in that are equally fantastic, and Asian Americans. Ayumi Hori is a good example. She's using her ethnicity to applaud and celebrate her heritage and bringing it to the forefront. And another idea that is, I think, emerging is also diversity in the use of the material in ways that we've never seen before. Technology is driving the clay field in ways that are just extraordinary. Now, 3D printing, of course, is a great example of that. But not only 3D printing, but we're seeing things like water laser cutting, and a person like the artist from England who works
Scott?
with decals. Yes,
Scott.
right.
Paul Scott.
Paul Scott. Fabulous cutting out of shapes with lasers and then superimposing. But laser cutting is just an incredible new technique that's come to clay. So that kind of diversity is happening in the field. Technology and diversity of ethnicity.
Fantastic. So we'll watch for the next group to come on the scene. And I have actually been seeing that also with names changing and work that really does have a different look.
Right.
It's really very exciting.
Well, Claudia Alvarez is a good example.
Right.
Mexican American who uses her background, her heritage, and what her background, her story, that's coming into her work, and I think it's fantastic. So now let's talk about the Marks Project.
Ooh, let's. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, does an object being marked affect your collecting an artist? And has that view of the importance of marks changed over time?
I have to tell you in all honesty, until you came along, I never paid much attention. And I have to thank you for that, that you've identified a real need in the field, one that we have been very short shrift of having. And I am so grateful that you're doing this project, because now I didn't look at the mark. I didn't see whether an artist signed it. I only looked at the expression. What was the artist saying? What was the technique? And whether they signed it or not wasn't of significance, because I wasn't thinking about long term. I wasn't thinking of the backstory. But you have created a backstory for all of these artists that you've now documented through their marks. What I mean by the backstory is that I think every artist needs a story, who they are, where they came from, what their interests have been, how they developed. And by going to your website, looking up a mark, maybe coming to it first by the artist's name, or if not by the name, coming through it by the mark, and then reading about the artist. You have documented so many people that I didn't even know I had, and I started looking at these artists that you've documented, and I say, oh, I have the work of that person. And then it gives more credibility to the work because they've been archived. There's nothing like being archived.
Well, and I think that one of the things that we realize at the Marx Project is, first of all, we go back to World War II, post-World War II makers to today. And the idea that everybody is known and remembered is a fallacy. We understand that there are makers who have really never been in the national scene, or may have been in the national scene and faded to be known only in their area of their kilns, who really will be looked at in the future if they can be found. So we provide a place for people to be discovered, for researchers to go for a starting place. And we do not write the whole story. We write what we can, and we do need makers to self-document. We do need collectors to help us. And I'm glad that it's opened a new way of looking. All of the other materials, particularly silver, pewter, the metals, have a history of documenting their makers. Ceramics in the UK are, I think, now in their third edition of a Marx Encyclopedia of the 20th century makers. And the Marx Project is the first systematic approach to documenting the makers of America working during that period. So I'm glad that you're now looking at the backs.
Not only looking at it, but appreciative, because you've done an amazing breakthrough in terms of documenting and caring about each of these artists. Many of these have been unknown,
Yes.
that you now are making known.
Yes, and that's thanks to collectors like Forrest Merrill in California, who has been collecting over the long span of time and has been very generous with sharing his collection with us, and Margaret Pennington, and some of the other great collectors that we've been able to use. The Crocker Museum, you can now go on our website and go to a collection search, select the Crocker Museum, and see the most fabulous collection of Southwestern Native American contemporary ceramic makers. And the most interesting thing is, unlike the general making public in the United States of the period, the Native American makers take pride in their work, their pueblo, their community, and they sign their work clearly with their name and the name of their pueblo or their community.
Wow, fascinating.
And it's beautiful work.
Really.
So I think we've been very fortunate, but we're heading toward our first 2,000 artist pages, each page representing one artist. Our goal is to hit 10,000, at which time we will have just begun to kick into the ball and document the makers working from 1946 to today's presence of 2017.
Unbelievable.
And the problem is, if these makers aren't documented now, they will not be searchable, they will not be
Yes.
remembered. And
Missed opportunity.
missed
opportunity,
opportunity. It's
absolutely.
also a marketing opportunity for the makers, because if you have a website, we link to the website, people can find your work
And find you.
and find you.
And update you and find out,
Yes.
are you coming back?
Yes.
I want you to know that I've gone so far now, being so conscious of the work that you're doing, that I do go around my collection. I'm looking to see whether something's been signed.
Signed.
And if it hasn't, I take the work to the artist with a magic marker, an
Yes,
indelible marker.
and have it signed
and
after.
have them signed it.
And,
and
you
have
know,
it signed. And so that's important to me now. And I think there's nothing wrong. I think painters sign their work. As you said, other fields. I don't know if jewelers do. That's
Oh,
probably,
yes.
that's true. There's mark on jewelers' work as
Sure,
well.
absolutely. I mean, Cartier certainly
Anyway,
did.
thank you for doing
You're
this
welcome.
project. It is an incredibly important contribution to the field and really unique. Really unique.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I enjoyed this interview very much.
I did
Thank
too.
you for coming to my home.
Thank
Come
you.
again. I'm always buying new things.
And thank you. I always love to come because my eye, it's like eye candy. I can't stop looking.
Okay.
And thank you to Marty, our
Thank you, Mark.
videographer.
And I do have to say something about this Global Day of Clay. I think it's an extraordinary idea. I think Bobby Silverman should be congratulated for coming up with a wonderful way to celebrate this extraordinary material and to do it in a way that puts it on the map, in a way that it sort of conjures up what the whole world is doing working in clay. And these little projects, these interviews, a special work being done in honor of the day, this is a wonderful way to collectively bring our field together in ways that we never thought possible,
And the other thing is it's a point of documentation
right?
for the year 2017. It
Right.
says, this is where we are. This is what's being done. This is who's doing it.
I think it's only going to grow. I mean, I can see years from now, I don't know whether it be done every year, but certainly a biennial or triennial, and to pick up countries that we don't even
Fantastic.
know have
Fantastic.
a clay experience and to bring that in. I was just reading an article about the artists in India who make those wonderful elephants in clay and the horses in clay, and how extraordinary those faces are and that tradition is. And I would love to see that,
In-
you know, in the Global Day
Day
of
of
Clay,
Clay.
but getting to more remote areas, you know, not just people who have access to technology, but people actually going out into the rural areas and seeing what people have been doing for clay for centuries.
I think, and you know, we'll find out that independent of knowledge of other cultures, frequently the same evolution in clay making occurs.
It's true.
So the use of textile for texture in early China, pre-war China, pre-warring states China, in Africa, in the Native American, you see the use of textile as a texturing, and yet there's no evidence that there was a meeting of the cultures to see it. So this is true. We
It's
can
true.
find connections the
Right.
more we see.
That's true.